Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well. I just thought I'd give you a very quick update on the situation with the Nvidia stock, as you can see here. So we'll cover Nvidia stock both from a daily chart and the weekly chart perspective, and also a very quick mention of Tesla. We'll cover Tesla very briefly, and also we'll mention the Nasdaq chart here as well. By the way, you may recall some weeks ago on the 10th of July, I was warning that the chart of Nasdaq was reaching a point of exhaustion right about here. But of course, a lot of people were not paying attention to the warning signs, and of course, they're now being caught up. They've been caught up in this extended decline that we've seen and we anticipated. So this is something I'll talk about very briefly in this video, and then we'll dig into the chart of Tesla briefly and then Nvidia as well. All right, guys, join me. Alright guys, welcome back. Before we dig into the chart of Tesla, Nvidia, and Nasdaq, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, if you haven't enabled the notification bell, I would really appreciate if you could, for example today, just subscribing and indeed enabling the notification bell, so next time I post a video, you'll be notified about that. Alright guys, let's dig in first of all to the chart of the Nasdaq before we dig into the chart of Nvidia and Tesla. And the reason is this: you may remember back on the 10th of July, I warned about this, that the Nasdaq was reaching a point of exhaustion and indeed extreme overbought conditions as seen by the RSI 34 setting. Here's a very brief clip of my video, we'll come back. But I think in the next several weeks, we're going to see the Nasdaq below this trend line. The markets are extremely overbought and indeed overstretched and coming to a point of exhaustion. Alright guys, as you heard, on the 10th of July, I was warning the Nasdaq could very well drop below this trend line support again because of increasing risks of a potential correction. Why? Because we had RSI 34 setting, extremely overbought. Let me just say this is very rare. And when it does occur, usually you see a pullback correction. We saw something like this, for example, back in 2023, in the summer of last year, when, again, the RSI became extremely overbought here. Again, we can use 21 setting or 34 setting of RSI. Usually when this occurs, we see a significant drop or indeed a pullback, as occurred again this year, as we can see. So we had warnings about this back at the time on the 10th of July. And again, some people just did not pay any attention. Some people were just complacent that nothing can go wrong. And we can see, of course, that it did. So this is actually very interesting. Let me just zoom in here on this chart. We can see that it's now below that trend line. And notice, by the way, guys, in technical analysis, when markets break out of a trend line resistance, like it did over here, and when they come, again, when they break out, and then when they fall below it again, that is a sign of increasing risks. So before we dig into the chart of Nvidia, let me just briefly mention Tesla because I don't have much to add about Tesla. I've already covered Tesla in my previous video. If you haven't seen that video from some weeks ago, go ahead and watch it. Nothing much has changed in my analysis. So far, as I mentioned again, we've had about 3 waves down. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So let's see what happens. Again, at the moment, nothing clear on the chart of Tesla. You may remember at the time when Tesla was rallying here, I warned that Tesla was reaching extreme overbought conditions just with the Nasdaq. Very similar with the Nasdaq. Again, 34 setting of RSI, extremely overbought. Usually when this occurs, yep, we see a pullback, which we expected. So we anticipated a pullback to the support levels here. The key question now, and here's the big question, is will Tesla be able to hold support at about, let's say, 200 or 206 and then bounce back, go above 258 or about 250, or will it collapse and go below 200? That is something we don't know at the present moment, and it's no point speculating. All right, guys? So for those of you out there who want certainty, all I would say is let's be patient. So we need the market to provide us with some more information, because let me just say there's some trolls out there, some very silly and uneducated people, some very ignorant people out there who say, well, Alessio, just tell us where the market's going to go. Well, excuse me, but last time I checked, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody has a crystal ball. So what we do is we assess the probabilities based on information we have. What I'm saying is we don't have all the information. And what I need to find out is, will Tesla be able to stay above 200? Very important, as I'm sure you know. 200 is a very important support because below this level, they will create an overlap. An overlap with this previous first wave will make it more likely that Tesla has topped, and it could mean more downside risk for Tesla. Okay, so that's why, again, if you're a bull, we don't want to see Tesla going below this level because if it does, and we'll have to wait and see, that would increase downside risk and increase the likelihood of a top in Tesla, especially if Tesla further breaks down below this low as well. So there's 2 levels, or I should say 3 levels you want to watch in the next few weeks. The first level is 200. That's really important because below 200, that increases downside risk and increases the likelihood of a top. Okay, that's the first one. The other level is right about here, 258. I mentioned this before as well. Because if Tesla manages to get above, I would say the first level of resistance is going to be here. So as long as Tesla stays below 234 or 235, this recent high, again, pressure for now remains to the downside. So as long as Tesla remains below this level of 234, 235, pressure remains to the downside, and we could see a test of these levels. And then we'll see if this level holds or not, because as I mentioned, below 200, okay, if it goes below 200, then it would increase risk to the downside, and it could increase the likelihood of a top in Tesla if that occurs. And by the way, let's remember, if Tesla breaks down below both these levels, 200 and 167, there's two support levels here, 200 and then 167. If it breaks down below both these levels, then yes, that would increase the likelihood not just of a top in Tesla, but significantly more downside potential towards below 138, below even 100. If that occurs, that would increase the likelihood of the red wave count. Go ahead and watch the previous video about Tesla that I made some weeks ago about the red wave count and the yellow wave count. So below these levels, okay, let me just repeat this point. If Tesla were to fall below 200, and especially if we get more downside below 167, it would increase the likelihood of the red wave count that I mentioned in the previous video. The red wave count suggests that we could move significantly lower by the end of this year and perhaps by 2025 into below the lows of 2023, below 100 levels, for example. On the other hand, if Tesla can get something going above this region here, let's say 234 to 258, then that would increase the likelihood of some kind of a bottoming structure. I would say this level is far more important, okay, 258, okay, 258, because again, I would need to see Tesla above this level. If it manages to get above this level here, above 258, then that would increase the likelihood of a move into the yellow wave count for a move, for example, to 300, 348, about those levels in the yellow wave count, which I explained in the previous video. Go ahead and watch that. So at the moment, nothing is clear. We don't have enough information here on Tesla. So I should say though, as I mentioned before, because Tesla has moved below the trend line support, so because Tesla has broken down below the trend line support and below the 38.2% retracement here, it has increased the likelihood of the red wave count a bit already. I would say the odds of the red wave count that I mentioned has increased somewhat by about just over 50%. Nevertheless, we don't have confirmation. So I'm going to keep an open mind here. We don't have confirmation. So let's wait and see if Tesla can now break down below 200 as well. So if it breaks below 200, yeah, that would further increase the likelihood of that red bearish wave count. Because below 200, and especially we see breakdown below 167, yeah, that would increase the likelihood of a top in Tesla and increasing downside risks in the red wave count potential that I mentioned. In other words, a move down towards the 100 level. And in other words, breaking down below the low we made here in the spring, below 138, and then below the 100 level by the end of this year. Okay, something to bear in mind about that. Okay, that's as far as Tesla is concerned, so we'll see what happens. As far as Nvidia is concerned, but let me just say again that I think a lot of these people who are, again, panicking, they should have paid attention to what's going on here in the market, because again, look at this. Nvidia stock became extremely overbought here, just with the Nasdaq, just with Tesla here as well. And unfortunately, again, I don't feel any sympathy for these people who are jumping in, becoming extremely greedy at the worst possible time. Okay, so usually when the herd jumps in, again, extremely over bullish conditions, extreme overbought conditions here. Yeah, that's what happens. That's what you get when people don't pay any attention to what's going on in the overall markets, and when they don't understand that markets do not move in just one direction. We see pullbacks, we see corrections, and yes, sometimes we see crashes as well. Okay, so far so good. But notice that Nvidia stock has not come down to this nice, important trend line support, this rising trend line, which is meeting us at about this level. Okay, notice this yellow line here. It's meeting us about this level that it hit recently. Now, this trend line may get broken, perhaps sometime, either today or next week. We shall see. Okay, we're seeing a lot of volatility right now in the major stock markets, the Nasdaq, the S&P. So let's wait and see whether Nvidia is going to hold this trendline support or not. I would say the support level actually is between here, because we have trendline support at this level, and we have the prior high at this level, about 97. Okay, so this region between 97.4 to, let's say, this region about here, 102 or 100, is going to be quite important. Let's see if it protects this level or not. So I would say this region for NVIDIA is going to be very important, okay, between 97 to about 102. Yeah. So that's going to be a very important support level, because below that support level, then that means a drop down to 93.5. In other words, what I'm saying is if NVIDIA cannot hold on to this support level, this region between 102 and 97.4, then the next support is going to be 93.5. I'll show you why that level is important, 93.5, this pink line. And then this level here, the 200 SMA, the 200 moving average here, which is catching up with the price. In other words, if it breaks down, if NVIDIA breaks down with force, with sustained pressure, below this trend line and below 97.4, if this region breaks, then downside risk increases towards 93.5 and potentially even down towards the green line here at about 80. The green line in the 200 moving average, very close to the lows we made here in the spring. Let's have a quick look also at the weekly chart. The weekly chart shows that NVIDIA has dropped down at the moment in 3 waves. Okay, so at the moment we've got 3 waves down, if you notice, from the highs we made there. 1, 2, 3. So at the moment we have 3 waves down. That means this drop so far is corrective, as I'm sure you know what that means in Elliott wave theory. So we have only at the moment a 3-wave drop in NVIDIA, which is coming to important support levels. As you can see here, it's coming down to the support levels just mentioned, between the 21 EMA and the trendline support about 102 to about this level here, 97.4. Now, if this level holds, and let's say gets above this region of resistance, then we could have a bottom in place. In other words, if NVIDIA gets above this region of resistance between 120 and 124.69, if this level breaks, and it's an if, we'll have to see, then that would increase the likelihood of a bottom in this corrective structure so far in NVIDIA. Okay? So in other words, if NVIDIA can hold on to this support, this region between 102 and 97.4, and then get something going. If it gets something going, let's say a bounce or a move above this resistance between 124.7 to 120, then that would increase the likelihood of a bottom in place in NVIDIA. I should say though, at the moment, as long as NVIDIA remains below this blue line, this level at about 120, it remains under pressure. And we may potentially see more downside, potentially perhaps to these levels. These are the next support levels here, between 99, the 161 extension, to about 97.4, and I would say this level as well. This level may get tested if support breaks that I mentioned here. The 34 EMA, the 34 weekly EMA. That's about this pink line at about 93.5 or about 94 approximately. Another thing you can do is zoom in on this chart. This is NVIDIA again. And what you can do is just get a regression channel and draw a regression channel from the high to the low there. And you can see this regression channel nicely shows the level of resistance that NVIDIA needs to break out of, as you can see right there. So notice this regression channel. Notice the top of this regression channel. So NVIDIA needs to get above the high of this regression channel, this blue line, this higher blue line, before we can say that a bottom is in for NVIDIA stock. Okay? And that puts it about the same region I just mentioned, that I just showed, this level of resistance. In other words, NVIDIA needs to get, if NVIDIA, by the way, gets above those levels. So if NVIDIA wants to prove to us and wants to show to us that it wants to form some kind of a bottoming structure, which by the way is by no means guaranteed, but if NVIDIA gets above these levels of resistance, regression channel resistance, the yellow resistance here about 124.7, and this recent high here at about 120, if it gets above those levels of resistance, then we may have a bottom in place on NVIDIA. But at the moment here, nothing is clear. And again, as long as NVIDIA remains below 120.16, again, remains under pressure, and we could test these levels of support next. So we could test these levels next between 99 or 97.4 to about 93.5. Let's see if these levels hold. If these levels do not hold, then we could see an extended move towards the 200 SMA at about the 80 level there, this green line. Let's see what happens here on NVIDIA. So a lot of things happening here. Again, at the moment, NVIDIA is trying to hold on to this uptrend support that you can see right here. This nice, at the moment, again, NVIDIA still remains in an uptrend, as you can see there, from the trend line and everything else. But if it starts breaking down below these levels of support, if it starts breaking down below 97.4 and 93.5, that actually may increase downside risk quite significantly. And by the way, if Nvidia drops below both 200 SMA and the lows it made here in the spring, if that occurs, that would actually increase the risk that perhaps Nvidia might have topped. But that's too early at this moment to call. It's too early to call. For the moment, let's just wait and see what Nvidia does in relation to the levels I just mentioned. Again, support levels here between 97.4, 93.5, and resistance levels here at 124.7 to 120.16. All right, guys, what I have here on the charts. Thank you very much indeed. But for now, I wish you a fantastic summer. I'll see you guys in the next video update. Thanks very much indeed. Bye for now.